Hi, this is Toni Preckwinkle. Good evening. And I want to thank you for joining us in this conversation. I would like to thank also participant for co-hosting and making this event possible. As many of you know, I'm a former history teacher, and movies like Judas and the Black Messiah are to me an important teaching tool. Every year we celebrate Black History Month, and I'm honored to present this screening and discussion as part of that celebration. But I believe that every month is Black History Month because Black history is American history. Many people today are still not aware of the important contributions of the Black Panther Party, like their free breakfast programs and their free health clinics, programs that the government, which tried to destroy them, co-opted. Some people may not be aware that the Black Panthers believed in electoral politics, including my own congressman, Representative Bobby Rush. Judas and the Black Messiah was a very troubling film to watch. I've been thinking obsessively about it all week, as my staff will tell you. I was a contemporary of Fred Hampton. I moved to Chicago as a first-year student in 1965, and Fred Hampton was assassinated in 1969. Although we didn't travel in the same circles, I was very aware of the Black Panther Party. And I was also involved in progressive organizations in Chicago. In fact, the Red Squad, run by the Chicago Police Department, surveilled my church, First Unitarian Church, and two organizations that I belonged to, the Chicago Peace Council, which was involved in anti-war activities, and Independent Voters of Illinois, a political organization that supported independent Democrats. The Chicago Police Department's Subversive Activities Unit, known by the rest of us as the Red Squad, spied on the Black Panthers as well as dozens of other organizations. Apparently, in addition to the Black Panthers, Unitarians, Methodists, Quakers were all seen as a danger by the Chicago Police Department in the 1960s. Chicago was very different 60 years ago. The Cook County Democratic Party was led by Mayor Richard J. Daley. Organizations like the Black Panthers and the ones that I belong to were fighting against a system that was openly racist and bigoted. Communities across the south and west sides of the city were devastated by redlining, hyper-policing, poverty, and a lack of access to health care. I vividly remember working at the time with the Independent Voters of Illinois, the IVI, to oust Ed Hanrahan, the state's attorney who was involved in the raid and assassination of Fred Hampton. The irony of campaigning for a Republican candidate for state's attorney speaks to how disturbing and pervasive the racism and corruption were at the time in Chicago and across the country. Across the city, the Rainbow Coalition that Hampton assembled was clamoring for transformational change. Today, of course, much has changed, but much has not. As Cook County Board President and as chair of the Cook County Democratic Party, I've fought for transformational change we sought more than 50 years ago. I've worked for a more inclusive political party to elect candidates who represent the communities we serve, to root out corruption in county government, to advance equity, to expand access to health care, and to transform our criminal justice system. So many of the ideas that President Nixon, J. Edgar Hoover, the Chicago Police Department, and Mayor Daley found so terrifying are not considered fringe today. Universal health care, universal basic income, the right to affordable housing. This pandemic has laid bare glaring inequities in our system and the urgent need for government to step in, step up, help those who are most in need. I've seen a lot of change in Chicago since I came here in 1965, but we're still far from where we need to be. But the change I've seen does give me hope. The hundreds of mutual aid organizations and efforts to help people struggling during the pandemic. The record number of women and people of color in local and federal government. The young people I've seen step up and get involved in politics and activism. Those are just a few of my thoughts after watching this fascinating film. I'd like to turn our conversation now to Denise Barreto, who is our moderator, and I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us. They are Skyla Hearn, Manager of Archives for Cook County, Erica Griffin, Public and Community Engagement Manager, Chicago History Museum, Jamal Cole, Founder, My Block, My Hood, My City, Anika McLaren, Executive Producer, Judas and the Black Messiah. Denise.
All right. Thank you, President Preckwinkle. And welcome, everybody. I am so excited about tonight's panel, and I hope that you are as well. What a powerful film, Judas and the Black Messiah. It's so provocative and really catalytic for a discussion this particular Black History Month in 2021. I'd like to open with a word from the film's executive producer, Anika McLaren. How did you come to this project, and tell us why this story is more relevant today than ever?
Well, the movie came to Participant and to me actually in 2019. And so it was brought to us by the producers of the film, and Ryan Coogler and Warner Brothers. And they were really looking for a partner to support the financing of the movie and then the social impact side. And so when we got the film in our hands, it was just kind of an immediate love affair. The filmmaker Shaka King and the story itself, which quite honestly was so unusual and a refreshing project to land in our hands. And I think, it's interesting because it felt relevant to us as an organization who believes in the power of storytelling, and me personally, who as a Black woman, it's very infrequent that a project about the Black Panthers really manifests itself. And so, quite honestly, at the moment that we came onto the movie, it felt immediate and important. But then that only kind of played out the events of 2020 and the current movement for Black lives really started to accelerate at a rate, quite honestly, when we were still editing the film. So it was one of those few special moments that happens in the movie business where you somehow are just right in the crosshairs of a political and socio-political cultural moment. And that's really what happened for us in this film. And, if only we could say that we knew there would be the pandemic and there would be, the sort of bigger recognition of what's been happening to Black people and the murders of Black people in 2020. We just, it just kind of was an accident, and we're just so fortunate, and I'm personally fortunate that we were able to join to support this film and move the movement forward.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I jumped the gun. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about Participant Media. Each of our panelists, as I call them back up, I would love for you to introduce, like I've done my homework and I know where you're all from, but I think our audience would love to hear about what Participant Media is, like what's your goal there? Because I know you have a dual role, right? You're the executive producer of this film, but you have a role at Participant Media. Would you share that with us?
Sure. So I'm based in Los Angeles, and I co-run the narrative film department at Participant, which is a film financing company that is dedicated to inspiring and creating social change with our documentary film, narrative film, TV, alternative content. And so my role as the executive producer on this film is sort of part and parcel with my role guiding the slate of films at Participant. And so that's who I am. I've been in the movie business almost 20 years. And this is, a place that I've been working now for a couple of years. And in fact, this is one of the first films sort of under my remit, and I'm just so pleased.
Awesome. Thank you so much. With Anika's backdrop, I want to hear from the rest of our panel the significance of a film such as Judas and the Black Messiah. And anyone can join in. And if you haven't spoken, make sure you introduce yourself in your role. But the question is, what's the significance of this type of film in this moment in our history, particularly in Chicago? Who's gonna unmute and be my first person?
I'll try. How's that?
Thank you.
You know, we're still struggling in Chicago with tremendous inequality, not just in Chicago, but in Cook County. And in this moment, I think that's particularly evident in the way the pandemic has wreaked havoc in our brown and black communities. I won't say that the majority white community has been spared. I would just point out that it's been devastating in black and brown communities. And of course, it isn't just the pandemic that created this inequity. The pandemic just exposed the inequity. And I think the other thing about this moment and thinking about the film, you know, the kinds of things that the Panthers were doing, feeding kids breakfast, which we now do in our schools, free health clinics. We've got federally qualified health clinics all across the country based kind of on the Panther model. But we're at a point where I think we have to think about not just addressing the symptoms. The real challenge is just profound inequity. And that's why we have to work on things like universal access to healthcare, a universal healthcare system, and universal basic income. That the challenges we face then, you know, kids not having enough to eat, hunger, people not having access to healthcare remain with us. And, you know, we're continuing to kind of do the same things, and we have to do something different. And what we have to do is universal healthcare, as I said, and universal basic income. We've got to address the inequity at its core and not just the symptoms of the inequity.
Thank you, Madam President.
Yes, absolutely. That was spot on, a spot on response. And I just have this to add. You know, there's so much talk, so much rhetoric right now about people being unable to recognize this country, about people not believing like this cannot be us, we can't be this. But I would argue that because so many stories, like the story of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, like many other stories of marginalized groups, are not listed in this canon of what we know of as American history or Chicago history, it looks like a surprise. But for individuals that have lived through these histories, that are raised on these histories, it is not. This is a continuance of a system, a set of policies, procedures to keep power in the hands of the few, to the exclusion, to the detriment, to the hierarchical misranking of people of color. And Chicago is certainly not spared from that. And the importance of the film right now is to fill in that gap, to start to do the work to share and broaden the story of what this city is, how different people access it based on their vantage point, based on their social underpinnings, based on who they are, racially or otherwise. And this story helps to illuminate some of that there's so much that isn't shared. When we go through these issues, we're at the confluent impact of the pandemic, of civil and social unrest. We've just had a massive election that led to complete chaos in the Capitol riot. And this was a long time coming. Each successive generation, there are moments like these, and filling in those narratives so that people understand that background, they have that context, is essential. And for me, this film did some of that work, absolutely.
And tell us who you are, Erica Griffin from the Chicago History Museum. We had a mic drop, but still, we want to hear who you are.
Just jumped in as usual. I am Erica Griffin, the Public and Community Engagement Manager, newly so, at the Chicago History Museum. Thank you for reminding me, Denise.
No problem. Anybody else want to tackle that? Why?
Well,
yeah, Skyla.
I wouldn't mind jumping in a little bit on that. Hello, everyone. I am Skyla Hearn. I am the inaugural manager of archives for Cook County government. And so I'd like to speak to what this film signals, which I think is, in part, it's the importance of forcing a critical look at the current power structures with an understanding that these practices rooted in systemic racism and oppression did not begin within contemporary times. You know, that it is imperative to be conscientious of the world around you, the world around us, and to be abreast of the social and political state of affairs, as well as to dig deep into history in order to understand how we as a society have arrived at this particular point at this juncture. And then, like, how do you do this? And of course, I'll go into this as our conversation moves on. But I'm just going to say it really quickly, right? We do this by utilizing the archives, which are primary source fact-based materials that support truth, the ability to rectify mistreatment, and it supports the deliverance of justice. And, speaking to Chicago, so across the country, including here in Chicago, people are calling for an end to injustices that plague society, which includes accountability from law enforcement, an end to police brutality and murders, and economic equality. In addition, being that the film's central focus is on the contributions of Chairman Fred Hampton in the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, it shows how Chicago people address the needs of the community to provide the resources residents are in need of. For example, the film spotlights instances of social service programs developed in communities and ran by the Black Panther Party. The growth and development of own social service programs that benefit local communities have been and remain continuous as long as there is a need and we as civic leaders accept the challenges and the responsibilities to take care of our communities. I had to bring that, being a Chicago native, and, just with all the things, the negative things that are out there about Chicago and Chicagoans, we step up, we take care of our own, and to stop it there, because I know that we're going to continue to get into this conversation, but I felt
No, that's great. Thank you so much. And bringing us to a Cook County government, I'm the inaugural equity director, and Skyla and I, as I just mentioned, were orientation buddies. And so that was one investment. And then the other investment was hiring our first archivist and building a team around her since last June. President Preckwinkle, can you tell us the reasoning behind that investment and why it's important now more than ever?
First of all, I'm a history teacher, first and foremost. Once a teacher, always a teacher. And so, primary sources are going to write history. And we in the county had never paid much attention to our archives or preserving the history of the county in any way. And it seemed appropriate that we put somebody in charge of doing that, so it actually got done. And I'm very grateful that Skyla agreed to take on the challenge. It's hard to go forward if you don't understand the past and the present. There's this expression, I think it's Swahili, Sankofa, you go forward while looking backwards. So I think it's really critical that we pay attention to the history period, and history of our county in particular in our case. But African-American history has always been, the history of people of color in this country has always been, it's Native American or African-American or Latinx. And it's important that we bring that history to the forefront in history, as I said earlier in my remarks.
Yeah, I am going to pause us because Jamal's back. Because, that's the beauty of these events. We have some technical difficulties. And Jamal, we want to hear your thoughts and tell us who you are and what you're doing in Chicago today. But I'll remind you of the question. It was, what is the significance of this type of film in this moment in our history, particularly in Chicago? Jamal?
Yeah, well, thank you guys for having me. Apologies for the technical difficulty. I feel like I should have a master's degree in Zoom and Hangouts and all this other stuff too. But again, my name is Jamal Cole. I'm the founder of My Block, My Hood, My City. The Fred Hampton. I'm a revolutionary. Just wanting to do that with my life. Like, come on, man. It's like I grew up with listening to Fred Hampton, Stokely Carmichael, I watched the movie I watched the movie Malcolm X so many times. I thought Denzel Washington was Malcolm X. Everybody was watching Aladdin and I was watching Malcolm X. So just to be able to arouse the enthusiasm of people, to be able to inspire hope in people, to be able to speak at the block level in front of the currency exchanges and the beauty supply stores. I grew up wanting to do that. So the significance of this movie to me was, Chicago is And Fred Hampton started a free lunch program, and I feel like I always take them to the West Side Justice Center every February so they can learn from the Black Panthers. And could you imagine Instagram? Or could you imagine if he had like a face? Like, he didn't have none of that, and he was still able to do what he did at 21. So my name is Jamal, man. I run an organization that doesn't have programs, but we respond to what. So if there's a storm, we shovel snow. If there's a heat wave, we deliver fans, deliver water. Throughout this coronavirus pandemic, we've helped over 8,000 different states with PPE, connecting them to primary healthcare physicians. We raised $1 million last year for all the businesses once the looting start, and we helped them out with feet removal, glass reconstruction, whatever they need. So we are like the Red Cross for Hood, but we exist because, man, we're inspired by people like Fred Hampton and Center and all the other, social impact orgs in Chicago. So thanks for having me.
You know what? I'm gonna need you to put Red Cross for the Hood on a T-shirt because I'm buying it. All right. Okay. Thanks, Jamal. Now I had to make sure we got you in. I want to bring it back to Skyla. Welcome to Cook County. You have a tremendous amount of reputation, and the county is very lucky. I'm echoing what the president said. Speaking to your vision for your department and how it relates to a film like Judas and the Black Messiah.
Sure. Thank you, Denise. And, again, this is amazing to be on this panel with all of you. Just fluttering heart here. But thank you for that question. So my vision for Cook County Historic Archives and Records Office at Cook County includes opportunity for the public to take, as I mentioned before, into the history of the county, as well as to increase the historical record to reflect the residents of the county, inclusive and equitable systems that document and provide access to historically significant fact archival materials. We all know, especially those of us, I'm gonna read from my paper here because this is so important, but I'm gonna start the sentence over. We all know, especially those of us who are a part of the BIPOC, LGBTQIA plus communities, we know that the mainstream historical or records and narratives are not reflective of the voices of all people. We are standing at an intersection in history where we can effectively contribute to the change that we as a society so desperately need. This is where my work as an archivist, the manager of archives of Cook County, comes into play by creating government archive, by creating, a Cook County Government Center. Our mission and responsibility is to compile the history of Cook County government and to explain the role of the county played in the region, the state, and the nation. And I just want to give some background information on what archives are. Everyone out there. So the archives are both physical and digital spaces where people such as yourselves can visit with and engage in knowledge development with primary source material, letters, correspondence, reports, photographs, materials to gather fact-based, again, information as evidence to such as Judas and the Black Messiah, as well as its predecessor film, The Murder of Fred Hampton, and so on. Of a particular group, a city, a province, people.
Wow. Much. and Erica, because she does some, you